Welcome to Photography Genius. You may not be an expert in aperture, but you can be a genius.
Why was Houdini a good photographer?
I don't know, Cody. Why was he a good photographer?
Because he kept aperturing out of his box.
Ah ha ha. Ooh, that's a good one.
What is aperture?
Aperture is the opening of a lens. It can open or it can close like this, allowing more light to come into your camera or less light to come into your camera, which is good for exposure. Now, as you adjust your aperture, more open or less open, it does change the brightness or darkness of your picture, so you may have to adjust your shutter speed or your ISO on other camera settings. Sometimes it is called iris in the video world instead of aperture. Other times we might even talk about f-stop number.
What is f-stop?
Ah, good question. F-stop is the focal length of your lens, the length of your lens, divided by the area of the opening to give you an f-stop number. So it's a mathematical formula, kind of complex on the screen as you have, but it does mean something. So the longer the lens is, the harder it is to get a more open hole to get to the back of the camera. So lenses, big fancy white lenses, very expensive lenses, you have to have a very long lens. It has to have a very big opening because the distance, the millimeter size, is much longer, which makes it so the light gets further and further to the back of the camera. Long lenses can be very, very expensive. But with this.
Can I get a new lens of this?
No. This is about enough money to get a popsicle after you're done taking pictures. But definitely no lens can be made for pocket change. Sorry. F number, or the f-stop number, is in complete stops. It's written like f1.4, or f2, or f2.8, f4, f5.6, f8, f11, f16, f22, and it goes on for a little bit more on some of the more complex cameras. Now, if you see on the screen, they are hard to memorize. You just have to commit them to memory over time. It doesn't make as much sense as ISO or shutter speed numbers. But if you notice on the screen, there is a pattern. For every 2 stops that is getting brighter, it is actually doubling or halving the number. So yes, there is math involved in photography. You may not like math, but you need to know a little bit of math to do good photography. As your aperture opens or shuts, it will change the blur or the amount of sharpness in your picture called depth of field. Now, the difference between f2 and f2.8 might not seem that big a deal. But the difference is you start to close your lens down from f2 to f2.8 to 4 to 5.6 to 8. It starts to get smaller and smaller, and there is now a significant difference. Notice the difference between f2 and f22. There's a very big difference. It makes a big difference to the depth of field.
Why the different lenses?
Good question. Well, there are many different kinds of lenses between expensive lenses and cheap lenses, and the problem is they have some that are called variable aperture lenses. Basically, they're cheap lenses. Only cost like $100, $200, real cheap. In the photography world, that's cheap. Variable apertures come with a small zoom lens or a longer zoom lens, and as you zoom in your camera, or you zoom out, it changes the maximum aperture. It actually changes. When you're zoomed out, it might be something like f3.5. As you zoom in, your lens will automatically close down to f5.6, making it maybe 3-4 times darker, and you can't change it. It's just the way the lens is made, the way the lens is manufactured. It doesn't have as much light getting into the camera. What we would really like is to have a fixed aperture lens. A fixed aperture lens might be something like an f2.8, so regardless if I zoom in or zoom out, that aperture doesn't change. The problem with that is very, very expensive. Now, with a variable aperture lens, the cheap lenses, only a few $100s that come with your camera with a cheap kit, the problem is you start to close up your lens. Outdoors, it's not that big a deal because there's a lot of light. But if you start to go indoors and you start to shoot fast action, maybe sports or a wedding where people are walking down the aisle, an aperture of 5.6 just might not be fast enough. You might need to have more of a shutter speed. And you can't do that when your lens starts to close down. Thanks for watching Genius Photography. Make sure you hit that like button and hit subscribe to see more videos just like this one. Well, technically, not exactly like this one. It's the same but different. Remember, you may not be an expert in photography, but you can be a genius. Can I have a lick?
No.
Pretty please?
No.
Pretty please with sugar on top?
No.
And a cherry?
No.
Whipped cream?
No.
See See you in the next video.